of the Sherpa. They'd never experienced anything quite like that before. And they were incredibly frightened. So we all knew we were in the same boat. We all knew this was something new. But it took a while for us to realize just how disastrous that had been, because it kind of hit us, hit our camp. We got the tail end of it. So the energy had pretty much gone out of it. And your first assumption then is, well, if the energy's gone out of it when it reached us, it probably was gone out of it when it reached everyone else. So we're probably fine. Mm-hmm. That was my first reaction. Mm-hmm. And then as we got out and started to walk towards the middle of camp, that's when you become aware that, no, this is actually a disaster. And it became very apparent very quickly that this was very damaging.
Was there a moment in your head where you thought that this is it? It's all over. This is how it's going to end. I saw a video. I'm not sure if you were the one filming it, but I saw people in their tent. They were praying. I saw some real panic and then kind of the aftermath. I saw like just pure adrenaline in your eyes as you were kind of explaining what had happened.
Well, as the ground started to move, I jumped up in the tent and my camera was there, and I grabbed the camera, and it has a massive big record button on it, which is kind of friendly for when you're wearing big gloves. So I just hit the record button and I carried it in my hand outside. And that's the footage that you're seeing. Okay. We were in a pure state of panic. There's no point in saying otherwise. We were completely petrified. And I remember when we were under the table, there was some Norwegians in our team as well, and one of them was beside me. That's the guy who was praying. And I remember not feeling that I was going to die or anything like that, but I remember trying to figure out how I should prepare myself for being propelled into the icefall. As if you could do that, as if you could prepare yourself for that. But I remember thinking, right, we're probably going to get launched here, so get yourself ready for this. Is not going to be nice. This is not going to be nice. And as well as that, you're kind of, the previous year when the accident happened in the icefall, the big piece of ice that released down on top of the Sherpa, it encased some of them. So, this was very powerful disaster in terms of how it impacted physically the people that it hit. And 3 of those guys have never been found. And I remember that going around in my mind a little bit, thinking, what's in this thing that's coming at us? And if there's big chunks of ice and rock and everything else in this, what's going to happen? But mostly I was trying to kind of brace myself for what I thought would happen, which is that we'd just get thrown, I said that we would get thrown entirely up into the icefall, and then we'd have to deal with the consequences of that.
It doesn't seem like climbing in your tent would be optimal for something like that. And later on in the video, I think you said that, while you guys are sleeping at night, if you do hear anything like an avalanche or earthquake or anything like that, climb out of your tent rather.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, why did you guys panic and climb in the tent and under the tables? Or was it just, we haven't prepared for this?
It was a combination of things. It was at the point where we saw it coming at us, it was almost on top of us. We had a matter of seconds between when we saw it and when it hit. And we had no idea how powerful it was. So we had to assume it was very powerful. We didn't have time available to us to work out where to run alternatively. We had to work out, well, what do you do now? Get under a structure or get behind a structure. And the table was a structure. So we thought, well, that might work. In retrospect, getting into the tent is the worst thing you can do, because now you're buried in a tent in snow. So now you've got 2 problems rather than one.
Right.
So it was a mixture of never having been in that experience, even though you've read about it and even though you know what the rules are. When the second hits, where you've got to make that decision that in 3 seconds time, that thing is going to impact all of us. What do we do? We just went for the first thing that we could see, which was get under the table. Now, for the next night, we sat down as a team after the end of that day, and we tried to work out what to do with that night, because we all of our confidence in base camp had been completely destroyed at that point. So when we look around us, every, overhanging piece of ice or snow on any mountain in our vicinity could possibly get to us. There's no rules anymore. If it's up there a long way away, it can be here. So what do we do? And we basically, it was a case of, right, well, sleep with your helmet on, go outside now and figure out, if you hear rumbling, try and get outside, figure out where you might think it's coming from, and choose your rock to get behind. Now, you might choose the wrong side, and that's the end of that. But, you know, choose your rock and do it now, and consciously have that path in your mind so that if it starts rumbling in the night, you can go. So we were a bit better prepared for that the second time. But the strange thing about first time versus second time is the second time, when you know something is coming, like an aftershock, can be more frightening than the first time when you didn't know what it was at all. The first time you're involved in an episode of blind panic where nobody really knows what's going on, including the people who are supposed to know most of all what's going on. The second time, everyone knows what's going to happen. Everyone can prepare themselves, but the fear factor increases even more the second time, because you've got to prepare yourself for something you know is going to happen. And that's ironically or strangely more petrifying than not knowing at all.
It's interesting, Paul. I'm sure your engineer's mind has thought about the physics of this so many times, and I mean, and the emotional part of it is just a whole huge aspect of it as well. But it's interesting that in your mind, in those seconds, you were thinking about getting launched, right? And probably the reality was your biggest danger was getting hit with projectiles from like a bomb blast, and you know, you didn't know what another possibility was getting buried, right? If it was really the full avalanche, the mass of the avalanche coming to hit you. But you were thinking getting launched. And when I look at your face in those videos, which is just such a visceral fear, and it just you know, that's what you're experiencing in that moment, and it's so real and in your face. You know, I tried to think about what would be going through my mind and what I would be feeling in that moment. Yeah, and I guess I would obviously, is this the end, or what do I grab? And if I'm going to get buried, that's the ultimate nightmare.
And there were people that were, there was a tent, a UK company had their camp kind of towards the middle of base camp, and they were right in the impact zone when it came, when all of the force of it came into base camp. And the natural reaction of everyone there was to get out of their tents and stand up and try and figure out what was going on. And it scooped them up. If they had stayed anywhere else and kept low, they would have been better than going outside and standing up. You know, but it's a natural human reaction. They went outside to try and figure out, where is the rumbling come from and how can I brace myself or plan for this? And by standing up, they were just scooped up and thrown and didn't survive.